We are live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. Welcome to My Counselor Live. I'm so happy to be with you guys today. I'm Tori, and I am here with one of our licensed counselors here at MyCounselor.Online, Josh Spurlock, to answer your questions over the next hour or so. Josh, why don't we just start by just introductions? Can you just introduce yourself to our viewers so that they can get to know you and what you do a little bit better?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder of MyCounselor.Online. I'm on the clinical team as a therapist as well and certified sex therapist. And so I primarily work with couples and working through marital conflicts and difficulties, as well as those that are facing difficulties in their sex life, wanting to troubleshoot those things so that they can connect better and enjoy that part of the relationship more.
Awesome. Yes. And I know we've, talked about this before, just that need for Christian sex therapists, within the church these days. And so I just think that the work that you do is so vital, so important to healthy marriages and, just great relationships. And yeah, I love having you on the team, Josh. And I'm so excited to just get your insight. And so guys, if you are just now tuning in, whether you are watching the replay or watching it live, we want to answer your questions. So if you're watching live and think of questions along the way, feel free to comment those, or you can absolutely inbox us if you'd rather keep it more private. That is not a problem at all. We're not going to be sharing names. So we would love to answer your questions. And if you're watching the replay, you can still submit questions and we will answer it in a future My Counselor Live episode. So we are going to jump in to our first question and we'll just be rolling through the next hour or so. So I'm going to jump right in. Josh, this person said, how do I know if my mother is emotionally abusive? I don't know if you could maybe start, Josh, by just kind of saying what is emotional abuse and then kind of leading into that.
Yeah, it's a good question, a good starting place. Emotional abuse is really about a disrespect for the personhood of the individual. And that God created people in his image and created us with value that's valuable to him, so much so that we have the gospel of him coming in the flesh to redeem the value that he finds in us. And his desire is that we would treat one another in a way that respects that value. That's really what love is about. It's about recognizing a person's value and treating them in a way that respects that value. And abuse is really about a disrespect of that value. It's about a acting towards, talking towards, treating in a way that disrespects that value. And it exists along a continuum, right? That you can have a low level of disrespect, high levels of disrespect, and there's like a amplifier or an amplifying effect based on the intimacy of the relationship that's involved, right? So if someone is hateful and disrespectful or manipulative, undermining in some way, and they're basically a stranger to me, the impact of that is pretty minimal, right? I'm like, I don't know you, you don't know me, go fly a kite, right? I'm not really all that impacted because there's no intimacy in the relationship. They don't have access to vulnerable parts of my heart that I don't allow them that close. But the more intimate the relationship, the more vulnerable the relationship, the bigger the impact of that disrespect. And so it serves as like a multiplier or magnifier, amplifier to the impact of those things. And so when you think about a relationship with a mom, that's a very sacred relationship, right? That no one is supposed to love us more, respect us more, value us more than our mom. Right? And that we literally were created and grew inside of her, and we're part of her body at one point in time. And she's supposed to be able to see our value, even if no one else in the world does. So there's a real kind of sacred trust that's there. It's as vulnerable a relationship as we can have as humans is in that relationship. And so to feel like your values disrespected, that who you are as a person isn't valued, as you grow and mature as an adult, that your autonomy, your thoughts, your feelings, even as a kid, are not valued, that you as a separate individual and person from her to not be valued or celebrated can be incredibly painful and can be really destructive to one's sense of self and identity, because we're not like born with an innate sense of identity, and that we have a unique identity as we're created in Christ and designed for specific purpose and good works and creation. But as an infant, we don't have a sense of that. Right? And so we really look to the important people, like our family of origin, our mom, dad, primary people in our life, to tell us about us. It's like as we're growing up, we're trying to create a self-portrait, right? An identity, but there's no mirrors. And so we can't just like look in the mirror and go, oh, that's what I look like. We have to ask the important people in our life, what am I like? What am I like? And we're reliant on what they tell us, their reflections to us, to have a sense of understanding. Am I smart? Am I dumb? Am I capable? Am I incompetent? Am I strong? Am I weak? Am I a delight and a joy? Or am I a nuisance, a pain? I don't know. And based on the messages that we get, that sense of understanding of who we are in relationship to important people in our life is shaped. And so very much we can grow up not having a good sense of who we are and our identity, or a conception of our identity that is distorted because it doesn't reflect the way our Creator sees us. And in a perfect world, we don't live in a perfect world and there are no perfect parents, but in a perfect world, our parents would reflect a exact image of us. That's how God sees us. So our parents would see us as God sees us, and what they reflect on us through their words and their actions and the way they treat us and the way they talk to us, the way they engage us, what they tell us about ourselves would perfectly reflect how God sees us. And we would grow up with an understanding of who we are in God's eyes and a sense of identity that's rooted in that. To the degree the message that we get from parents is distorted or doesn't match how God sees us, is the degree to which our self-image, self-concept is distorted. And so that's kind of in a few paragraphs how that sense of identity and value is formed, and the trauma or impact that being distorted or disrespected kind of really happens in a relationship like with the mom.
Yeah. Would you say, is it possible to be emotionally abusive and not realize it? To,
Totally.
be in that state and not even, it be intentional?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That very often we do what we know, right? That we can't give what we don't have, and we repeat the patterns that we learn in our own experience. And so it's normal and common, though not necessarily good and healthy, for parents to respond in ways that resemble what they're familiar with in their own upbringing. And so it can feel very normal to them because it's what they're used to, and yet still be really destructive without them knowing it or realizing it.
Yeah. So how would you, what if, for example, say my mom is emotionally abusive and I recognize
Mhm.
in that in her, how would you suggest that I handle the situation if she doesn't realize it? I mean, people don't typically respond well to being told that they're emotionally abusive. So what would be your suggestion in handling that kind of situation?
Yeah, super difficult and almost impossible, if not impossible, to navigate if you don't build into your life supports of some strong, healthy people. And that if I grew up my whole life being told that the color of the chair you're sitting in is red, then I sit down with you and you tell me that you're sitting in a white chair, like you're colorblind. You don't know what you're talking about. That's clearly red, and because I know that that's red, my whole life I've known that that's red. Right? That's what I've known, and so I'm going to be resistant to taking in information contrary to what I know to be true. Right? And so we kind of are self-reinforcing in our view of things in a way. And so when we're beginning to kind of question some of what we've been told, maybe because it just doesn't feel right, doesn't set right, and something inside of tells us that this is not true or not the way things are supposed to be, that there's that healing, redemptive, growth-oriented part of us that God's designed into us that wants to right what's distorted and wrong in us. So we have a sense that something's not right here. You're going to need people in your life that you can reality test with, right? You've got to be able to have people in your life that you can bounce your own thoughts as well as what you're hearing from the primary sources or the family of origin sources in your life off of to kind of reality test those things. And the church can be a really redemptive and healthy place for that, where our church family, in that, is able to be a family to us that helps us heal from some of the wounds that we experience maybe in our family of origin. So, one of the things that you are looking for in that is looking at their family and go, if I'm going to surround myself with some other women, right? Tori, if you're working through this yourself, you're going to want to surround yourself with some other women that can, would be old enough to be your mom, but not your mom, that you can trust and can be a support to you and help you kind of sort through the murky waters of trying to distinguish what's true and what's not true as it pertains to the messages that you've received about you growing up. So you're going to want to look at those women's families, their marriages, their relationship with their kids and whatnot, and go, is that the kind of relationship that I want to have with my spouse? Is that the kind of relationship when I'm their age? Do I want to have the kind of relationship that they have with their kids? And are they good models for what it is that you feel drawn to and what's inside of you is telling you is what you would want for your life? And that's kind of a starting place for beginning to identify potential people that you might invite into your life in this way to then be able to kind of bounce these things off of, which then gives you some sources of truth and some sources of affirmation, some sources of encouragement and support that helps you get it straight in your own head, kind of who you are and your experience, which then gives you the ability to stand up against that and to set boundaries with maybe a parent that's abusive in your life. Otherwise, it gets really confusing and really difficult, if not impossible, to just all on your own, no support, no outside kind of direction or truth testing or anything else to completely go against everything that you've ever known. Like that's kind of hard to do.
Right. Yeah. No, I love your insight. I think that that's awesome. My mother is not emotionally abusive, but my heart
That's
does ache.
good.
Yes, no, it's great. But my heart does break for the person who
Yeah,
asked this question because, I mean, like you said, the mother-daughter, mother-son relationship is so precious, and it's so precious to the father. And so that brokenness there, that crookedness that, it was not designed to be there. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to handle and incredibly difficult to manage because, you think of my mom, my dad protects me, not they're hurting me, and I think that that can be an extremely difficult situation. So my heart breaks for the person who asked this, but I hope that this was able to give you some insight and give you some encouragement. Yeah.
absolutely. I respect the the courage that it takes to ask the question and put yourself out there. And I just want to really affirm you that there's a part of you that wants to heal that God's put in you. It's that part of you that asks the question, and that's kind of drawing you along this journey as the Lord leads you forward into the healing that you long for.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Guys, if you are just now jumping on, welcome. I can already tell this is going to be a great episode. I am just loving getting to interact with y'all and getting to interact with Josh. And this is just great time to be on. If you guys think of any questions, feel free to comment them below or inbox them to us. We're so happy you're here and just so excited to get to interact with y'all for a while. So next question was asked, how can I increase my attraction to my spouse?
Yeah, good question. So, trying to think through, maybe I don't have the same level of attraction that I didn't once did. That's changed in some way, and I'm trying to rekindle that, care about kind of cultivating that in my heart, that the relationship matters to me, my marriage matters to me. So I appreciate the heart from which the question comes and your desire to be intentional in developing your relationship and protecting your relationship. So I start with kind of identifying some ways in which that drift can happen. And so, how do we get here? Why is it the experience that I'm having today with my spouse different than where we started at? And the first thing I would want to look at is the nature and the quality of the relationship, right? That there's an effect and an influence in our attraction to individuals based on how we experience them. And that if our emotional experience with someone is really negative, it's going to affect their overall attractiveness to us. Right? Even if they, appearance wise, externally, they're exactly the same as when we were first together, that if the cumulative experiences or life together have been really negative, the overall attraction that I experience is going to be negative. And that it's not going to be a good thing. So consider whether or not there's some um, things that need some attention there, because you're not going to be able to just like will yourself to be more attracted. Like that's not how attraction works. But you can identify the things that are off-putting, what's getting in the way of feeling attraction, and work on resolving those things. So that's one piece that you can look at. The other thing to consider is there a comparison thing going on? Because that'll really get in the way as well. That if you're always comparing your spouse to someone else or a societal standard of some sort or beauty norm or something of that nature, what you're doing is you're really growing and fueling discontent kind of in your relationship.
Yeah, I
Right?
think that that can kind of go along with expectations, kind of unrealistic expectations for your spouse.
Totally. Yeah. That you can be comparing your spouse to expectations that aren't realistic and aren't fair in the relationship. Uh, that can be either sometimes a previous version of themselves, and we can compare our spouse to an idea that we don't age. and that somehow my spouse is not supposed to be affected by the forces of nature and time and the reality of sin's effect on the body and
I
the
mean,
fact that,
right?
what's that?
Wouldn't that be nice, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be fabulous, right? That would be awesome. We would all really love that. And yet, that's not really the world that we live in. That we'll get a new body someday that's not affected by sin, like this one is. There'll be new heavens and new earth. But today ain't that day. You know, we live in the realities of a broken world, but if in our heart we have this expectation of our spouse that those things wouldn't affect them or impact them, then we're doing this comparison thing again with something that's not reality, that's not real, and we're cultivating a discontent with our spouse within our heart. And so if we're doing that, then it's going to affect our attraction towards our spouse, right? Because we're always doing this comparison piece in our heart. So if that's part of the tape that's playing in our head, then we want to address that. We want to stop that. On the affirmative side, what we can do is we can really be intentional about focusing our lens on the things that are praiseworthy about our spouse and all their different quality traits, and to magnify by way of our focus those aspects of our spouse that are attractive, you know, that desirable and attractive quality traits around our spouse. And as we uh, refuse to give airtime to those comparative and detracting things and focus our airtime, kind of watering the plant of attraction towards our spouse, the one will grow and the other will atrophy. It's likely that we got here in the first place from a flip flop of that, kind of a focus on all the things that are wrong with our spouse and a lack of focus on the things that are right with our spouse. And over time, that shifts our attractions.
Right. And that, I mean, that's easy to do. You know, when you get married and you start living with someone and the walls kind of fall down and you get to see, oh, this is how that person reacts to things. You know, it's easy to start just picking at the things that you don't like.
Right, because when we're dating or we're engaged, we're love drunk, right? Like we're like intoxicated with all of the hormones that are a part of new love, right? And so that really causes our vision to be focused on all the things that are right about this person, and we can be even blind sometimes to the things that are not right, that are there, that are not good. But then we kind of sober up as we get into marriage a little bit, and we kind of see the whole picture of who they are, and the
Right.
things that are yeah, that are not so attractive become a little bit more apparent and more in our face.
Totally. And there's this balance of I find you attractive and I love these things about you, but also I recognize that you are a broken human being and there has to be grace for that. And
Yeah.
there's this balance that is very difficult to find, but you know, with sanctification, hopefully it comes eventually. I don't know.
Well, marriage is a pathway to that for sure. Because if anything will expose your sinful tendencies and your broken heart, it's marriage. It will really bring those things to the surface. So you can either dump them in your spouse's lap and blame them for it, or you can own them and say, "Oh, I hate that this is inside of me, and I want to grow and mature through that."
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Thank you so much, Josh, for answering that one. We just got a question that was sent in as we're live right now. Guys, if you are on right now and think of a question, feel free to send that in. This person said, what are your views on sex before earthly marriage, since a biblical definition of marriage is only a lifelong commitment under God?
Right on. Well, there's a lot of different opinions on the matter, you know, and I don't speak for everybody within Christendom about how things should be navigated. But my understanding of the scriptures is God designed sex for the marital relationship. And it's about revealing an intimacy and connection between husband and wife that's reflective of the divine marriage and the kind of intimacy and connection that God desires to share with us. And he shares intimacy and connection with us within a covenant relationship. And God is committed to us and covenanted with us, and we receive him as our spiritual husband as we accept Christ into our life, and we have a relationship of fidelity with him where we are committed to not worshiping any other gods, but that we are with him and with him only, and that he cherishes us and is connected with us. And in that context that we share that intimacy. And the scriptures suggest that that's the context that marriage is supposed to represent and that sex within marriage is supposed to represent. And so that's my understanding of the scriptures and what it communicates. And I would just encourage you to go to the scriptures yourself. When King Jesus returns, you're not going to give an account to me for how you navigate your life and say, well, Josh said so, or is not gonna fly. You're accountable to the king yourself. And so you really have to go to the Lord and to allow him to lead you through some of these questions and to be able to conduct yourself in a way that you can feel good giving an account to yourself and for your choices before your king.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing that sticks out to me about what you just said is, investigate it for yourself. Read the scripture and let the Holy Spirit, lead you in the direction that you're supposed to go in. And I think that is a great word, and I appreciate that, Josh.
So many things that applies to.
Yeah.
The Lord wants us to engage him, right? He wants to engage us in a dialogue. He invites us into dialogue with him. And so we can go to the scriptures and we can bring our heart to him. And when we do that earnestly, we earnestly seek the Lord, we'll find him and he'll meet us in that space.
And how beautiful that we have that access.
Yeah.
We are able to come before the throne and that he allows us to be there,
And he invites us, he wants us to be there, right? He wants that kind of relationship with us.
Absolutely. Awesome. Appreciate your intentionality in answering this question. So we're going to jump into the next one. And this person, I'm not sure if it's a mom or a dad, but they said, my son just admitted that he struggles with porn. How can I help him?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm curious, a few pieces of information or details that I'd like to know. Is your son, 15, or is he 25 or kind of 35 or 45? And so I'm not really sure what stage of life your son is in when he's kind of making this admission. But we'll maybe assume that he's a teenager, that either mid-teens, late teens, high school, college age, somewhere in that range. First of all, kudos to him, man. It takes guts to be able to own that I'm struggling with something that I don't feel good about, and I need help because my own efforts to try to manage this are not working so well, and I just need to invite someone else in the circle. So good for him and having the kind of courage to step out and invite help, and good for you as a parent, right? That
I
he
was gonna say, they raised a great kid.
yeah, raised a great kid, but also that there's safety in the relationship, right? That he felt like he could bring that to you.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
lots of kids that don't feel like they could bring that sort of thing to their parent, and so I'm thankful that you guys have the kind of relationship where he feels like he's able to bring that and disclose that, and look to you for help with that, and have the expectation that you're not going to be judgmental or attacking or demeaning or beat him up around that, but that you're going to have compassion and care about where he's at and want to be able to be helpful to him in figuring out what to do. So it's a good question. There are a number of articles that we have on the website and videos that speak specifically to how to navigate this conversation with your sons. I'll just grab a couple of highlights from some of that to say, yeah, start with, again, doing the same thing that I just did and being affirming of the courage that it takes for him to bring that to him and appreciating the relationship that's there that enables that to be the case. That the enemy wants to use shame, this kind of idea that you're unworthy of love and acceptance, to create isolation, which really keeps us vulnerable. And so to face that and come through that and risk putting yourself out there is a really courageous thing. And you want to make sure that you obliterate any shame around that and be able to go, listen, and I'm glad that you came to me. I respect you for doing so. We're going to figure this out, and I'm going to be here for you, and it's going to be okay. Right? There's a need for him to know your acceptance and your respect and your love for him isn't changed, impacted, or undermined because he's having a struggle with something, right? Another piece that we want to kind of work through is to be able to make sure that not only is this struggle not a deal breaker or hindrance in your love for him, it's also not that way in his relationship with God. And a lot of times the enemy wants to send the message that God's angry with you and displeased with you and disgusted with you, and that he doesn't want to hear from you or be around you because you're having some sort of a struggle like this. And the enemy uses that to keep people isolated from God, that dynamic. And you can help speak to that by speaking on God's behalf, right? That as a parent, you are a revealer of the Father, that you help your kids know what God's like by the way that you relate to them. And so you can affirm that that the love of the Father is unhindered, by the fact that he's struggling with something. That there's a love that transcends those shortcomings and struggles, and that his relationship with the Lord isn't contingent on or hinged on his ability to do everything right all the time. It's a beautiful thing about the gospel is it's not about us being able to be good enough or work good enough in order to be in relationship, but it's about the perfect sacrifice of Christ that justifies us and makes us right in relationship, and that Father sees us through the lens of that, and that
Man,
we're accepted by him.
that I mean applies to so much more than just this specific struggle. So many of us that need to hear that message.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So that would be the starting place, kind of foundation, just kind of this relational context that's there. I'd also really encourage you to be affirming of his sexual desire. Like, it's not weird for a teenager to be interested in the opposite sex. Like, that's pretty much how God wired his body to be. And so that's not a sign of the curse, while it may feel like a curse to many teenagers and single men, that's not a sign of the curse. That's actually part of the design, that the creator wired that into him, and that he would have a curiosity and an interest and an attraction to the female form is the way he's made. It's the way it's supposed to be, and that. And so I don't want to demonize or shame around the really normal kind of sexual desire and arousal kind of response that's wired into his body by God on purpose in that. Instead, we want to think about it in terms of stewardship. That's the word and the concept that I think is really helpful for us to use when considering our sexuality and how we navigate our sexuality. Is to see it as something precious and valuable that the Lord has given us, and that's fun and great and good, and designed for being shared with our spouse. and that stewarding it in a way that honors its design and protects our heart and protects our future in terms of our experience and expression of that is what we are after. And so we're looking at, in that context, why would we not want to have pornography be a part of our life? How does it hurt us? What are the things that it kind of takes away from us and robs us of, in a way that we would want to protect our heart, and future relationship and our sexual expression from those things, and to educate, communicate around those things, and then to kind of talk about what it means to take ownership of that stewardship for oneself, and kind of practical ways of stewarding or making decisions about what I'm going to engage or not engage, and where and when and so on, in order to make decisions and support decisions that protect that. So that would be kind of the starting place for that dialogue. There's a lot more that can be said, a lot of articles and videos that we have put out around the subject, but that should get you started.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. I was thinking the same thing. There are so many articles and so many different counselors that have talked about this, and it can be a big struggle for the teenager or whoever is struggling with this addiction. And it can also be a struggle for the parents, who are having to navigate this conversation that they probably didn't expect to have, So definitely encourage those watching, if this hits close to home, to hop on and see if you can find something that just speaks to you and helps you in this.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that if you have a teenager, it hits close to home, right? That God wired us as sexual creatures, all of us. And so the reality of this being something that needs to be talked about and navigated isn't just for like those kids, it's for all kids. We all kind of need to have an awareness of these issues, and be intentional about how we navigate and steward our sexuality as a single person, as a married person, at every stage of life. And so it's just a topic that we need to talk about. And contrary to sometimes popular belief, that this is a conversation you need to have with your daughters as much as it is with your sons.
That is exactly what I was about to say. Yes.
Yeah, and so there can be this mythology around it that pornography is only a kind of a male struggle or a male issue, but that's just not true. There's a lot of research that shows the contrary, and a lot of, just as counselors, kind of practical knowledge from working with folks, that's just not true. And so make sure you're having the conversation with your daughters as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. We have another question that was sent in, kind of continuing on this topic of parenting and talking with your kids. This person said, with all the talk about child sex trafficking and missing children in the news right now, is this something I should address with my children? And if so, how?
Yeah, good question. Yes, it is something that you should talk with your kids about. You should give them a frame of reference, for what it is, because they're going to be hearing about it. They're going to see it in the news. They're going to see it on TV. They're going to hear others talking about it. And it's always good for information to come from mom and dad. Like, it's always good for the frame to be set in terms of the lens to kind of think through these kinds of issues, to be intentionally set. And I say intentionally, I mean, instead of just by whatever kids pick up from watching, listening to mom and dad and what they think it means about the matter, or just kind of hopefully proactively and intentional instead of reactively, then being able to have this conversation before the conversation is coming to you. And there's two maybe sections of that conversation that you want to have. One is just about what it is, right? And to have that at an age appropriate conversation, right? So you can have a age appropriate conversation about sex trafficking with a kid at any age, right? It doesn't, if they're old enough to understand like stranger danger, They're old enough to understand that sometimes bad things can happen and not everybody in the world is good. And that sometimes there are grown-ups that hurt kids. And this topic, this trafficking topic, is about situations where some grown-ups hurt kids and wanting to protect them when that happens, or hurt other people even, because trafficking isn't just a child kind of scenario, but I think the question was specifically around kind of children and that dynamic. And so in simple language like that, most kids that are verbal are going to be able to process that and understand that. And that's a perfectly good enough level of detail for a young child. And then you can get progressively more detailed, kind of what that looks like in terms of the grooming and the kidnapping and the different things that can be a part of it. And so one part is educational in terms of just a frame for understanding what's happening there. The other part of it is a defensive kind of piece of knowing how to recognize, something's not right, right? And you can use language just like that. Something's not right. Okay? You don't have to use elaborate and complex or technical language. Simply a matter of, how do you recognize if an interaction that you're having with an adult doesn't feel right? What do you do if an interaction you're having with an adult doesn't feel right? What do you do if you kind of notice these kinds of grooming type behaviors and you see it and it seems, is this that? To be able to have them know to communicate, know to kind of distance from the situation, know to let somebody know that they're having this experience that's taking place. Kind of know what to do in if they're in an active kind of abduction scenario, right? Where and there's a lot of resources out there that you can engage about, like passive resistance and things like that, on how you can kind of decrease the risks of abduction. So being familiar with the resources from those that have spent the time studying and practicing and deploying these things, and convey that as part of the conversation as well. So educate them, give them a frame for understanding what it's about, and also educate them in terms of how to be safe in a world that's not always safe. And don't freak your kids out, which maybe sounds easier said than done given the conversation that we just had. And as a parent, we can be really freaked out, right? But we also don't want to send the message that the world is a dangerous place everywhere and they need to be afraid of every adult that they see, and they kind of need to live in fear about something bad happening around every corner. Like that kind of hypervigilance and anxiety producing and engendering atmosphere is really not helpful for them either. And will, over the course of their life, teaching them to be an anxious human being is probably going to have more negative impact than they are likely to experience by way of trafficking. And so there's a balance in there of matter-of-factly communicating around these things without terrifying your children or having an atmosphere that where you live in fear and they catch the anxiety from you, or where you kind of communicate a message that leaves them living in fear.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're very intuitive. I can even think back to moments in my childhood, even like 5 or 6 years old, where I picked up on emotions and things that people were feeling that I couldn't quite understand, but felt. And yeah, in this culture and the world we're living in today, this is a conversation that unfortunately has to happen, and should happen. And yeah, it's a crazy world. Oh man, but you know what? The Lord loves the children. He loves you. And yeah, just praying, for the whole world and this battle that is happening right now, this honestly spiritual battle having to do with child sex trafficking and all of these different things. So yeah, you guys, that was the last question that we had for today. Josh, I would love it if you would just kind of close us out with just a word of encouragement to those who are watching live right now and those who watch the replay. Just if you could close us out with that.
Totally. Lots of good questions that we had today. And I want to encourage anybody that's, as you're watching this, you've had questions come to mind, send them in. We'll be happy to speak to them. I want to share with you from the experience that our team has developed from working with individuals and families through the years, to be able to speak into the specifics of your situation. Sometimes when you're reading an article or reading a book or watching a video, it doesn't always kind of capture the dynamic of your situation. So it's maybe hard to know, how does this apply to me and what it is that I'm going through. This is a great venue for you to be able to add a little bit more nuance to a question and hopefully get an answer that is more tailored or fitting to you. So blessings on everyone that's kind of watching and taking this in. I just pray the Lord's favor on your life. And I want you to be encouraged as you journey on and know that me, myself, Tori, the MCO team, that we're here cheering you on and want to be in your corner and support you in any way that we can.
Absolutely. Awesome, you guys. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will be back and see you next week for another episode of My Counselor Live. We love getting to interact with you guys and answer your questions. Just like Josh said, submit them all week. You can totally do that. We look forward to these every week. So we will see you guys next time, and thanks for tuning in today. Bye, guys.